Hey everybody, I've got two announcements to make and they're both contradictory and don't make any sense. And that's some good lighting right there. I like how you can't see what's on the covers of them. That's some good use. This is obviously pre-recorded and I'm talking over it and whatnot. You really realize why people have studios and stuff when they make it big or whatever the fuck, because like it's actually really hard to film anything ever in real life that isn't like selfie vlogging, which is my least favorite thing to do. Anyway, schedule changes, two things coming up. I'm gonna bring them up one at a time because they contradict each other and it's just too complicated to talk about them together. So first of all, I am cutting the Let's Try time slot. I'm not removing the time slot itself and like just giving us nothing. I'm just repurposing it so that it's no longer Let's Tries, because there's just too many Let's Tries. I still want to do Let's Tries, but I don't think they should have their own time slot. I think that's just too much, because right now we have the 11 a.m. RPG slot, the noon Let's Try slot, the 1 p.m. Patreon slot, and the 2 p.m. fucking nightmare confusing rotation slot that has a AAA. Within that one time slot there is a AAA slot, an indie slot, a puzzle game slot, and a classic game slot, and they rotate between themselves so that every fourth game is a puzzle game, for example, and every fourth game is a classic game. And it was an interesting experiment, and I did enjoy the variety that it provided on some level, but it just takes so long to go all the way around, and it's already had hiccups. Like we have not even finished the second rotation yet, and already I was like, I think I really want to do Last of Us 2 now and not 3 games from now, when Last of Us 2 would be like the AAA part comes up. So let's rearrange it this time, and maybe the rotation will work differently each time it goes around or something. But it's just too much. It's just a lot of things that I think are stuff I should cover on a regular basis are all squished into one time slot, because that's just kind of what was left. Because I didn't want to give up the idea. Obviously, the Patreon slot has to stay. And I didn't want to give up on the 1 hour RPG slot, because I think having an hour-long episodes is helpful for that kind of stuff. But it's just not good. It's not working, in part and in particular because it's just how long the rotation is. In part, like I like Hades came out, and I'm like, wow, the Supergiant game. I always cover those games. It's finally out, 1.0. All right. Next time, and it came out while I was covering Kentucky Route Zero, which was the indie slot. So it's like, wow, that'll be 4 games from now. I'll finally get around to Hades. Cool. And I have this ever-growing backlog of puzzle games to get to, like House of Da Vinci 2, The Room VR. That did a big list. I did a big thing, the Superland Crash. There's another Rethink Evolved game. Like I did a big multi-stage poll just in the selection process of choosing this is not a game, or there is no game, or whatever it's called, because there's just too many competing things. It's just a fucking nightmare, and the pressure was on. It's like this is the one puzzle game I'm gonna play for like 3 months, and if I hope it's good. So I kind of let the audience pick it, because I didn't like the idea of having to pick that and deal with the opportunity cost and all that. And the more I look at it, the more I'm just like, you know what? Maybe part of the reason why I feel there's such a crunch and a pressure with the schedule is because Let's Tries are taking up 25% of my time slots, which once upon a time, when it was a small part of a larger constellation of stuff, it made more sense. But now, it's just kind of greedy. It's just too many. It's also kind of a pain, because Let's Tries are kind of a pain, because you install a game, you select a game, you like learn a new game from scratch and record it and make a new thumbnail for it. Like everything about a Let's Try is a really disproportionately time-consuming process compared to most videos that I make, and so having it be every single day is also kind of taxing eventually. So I kind of held up for weirdly long, and I think to some extent I guess it was probably Patreon, right? Because I went and how do I put this? Because I made a Patreon perk where people could select Let's Tries, and it had an X number of slots available and stuff like that. And like I thought that was a cool idea, and I think it was, but it kind of leads to pressure where you got to keep the Let's Tries around forever to some extent, because you have to be able to cover those 15 requests every single month. So maybe that's why I didn't really even question the idea of getting rid of Let's Try as a slot, but now I am. And once I had the idea, I was like, no, actually, this is it. This is the solution. This is my commitment. Because if we get rid of the 12 o'clock Let's Try slot, there's no longer daily Let's Tries. That means I can split those two categories up. So instead of having AAA, indie, puzzle, and classic all in one time slot, I can now split them in two separate time slots, so I can have one. Anyway, here's take two, because I saw the footage of that. I'm like, fuck, a glare covered the screen, so you couldn't even see what half the things were. So here's my different other shitty attempt that has its own things wrong with it. Can't wait to find out what that'll be. Turn it around. There you go. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna have the four slots are gonna become the four categories that are rotating in one slot are gonna become one slot now. So there's gonna be a AAA and classic. And we'll just throw AA in there too, because the distinction is kind of, if we get down to it, figuring out with certain edge cases whether they're indie, AA, or AAA, and so on is like a thing. Like Humankind Ancestry or whatever it's called, like the ape game. It's like there's certain games that present as at least AA, but they're maybe technically indie, and it's hard to say. So it's a little arbitrary. Sometimes it's just about the aesthetics or whatever, but it's just a general guideline that I work with. Anyway, one time slot is going to be AAA, AA, and Classic. So basically it's just going to bounce back and forth between a newish game or a current generation game and then one of these. And this should not be surprising, because I keep teasing the idea that I keep wanting to get back to certain older games, and I have this building the catalog, which I can finally talk about what's on the screen now, which is that this is my classic games collection. None of these are games I owned as a child, even if they are games I owned as a child. And that what I mean is that these are not those copies, because when I was a kid, every time we would move on to the next console generation or whatever, my parents would just like garage sale off all of our games and so on. They didn't really have any idea, like unlike movies, they didn't seem to really respect the idea that like the old stuff doesn't necessarily just go in the garbage. So that's just kind of a bummer. But I don't have any of my childhood copies. So even with stuff like Mischief Makers or Jet Force Gemini that I talk about all the time, or Silent Bomber there, I had to go get it again. I've been tracking games down. But I have a habit of walking into like thrift stores and whatnot and just kind of like picking up things that are essentially they're basically like supplies for my job, basically, is the idea. So if I see something that's like, oh man, that game, I finally found it, or if it's just like, I don't even know what the fuck that is, but it looks interesting. I mean, it's $3. I might as well just grab it. I might use it for my work at some point. I just kind of stock up here and there when I make trips to these places, and just kind of have some of these. You've heard stories about some of the copies of some of these games, funnily enough. And so that's what I want to do, is I want to switch back and forth between modern-ish games and oldish games in one time slot, so I can do more of these classic games and have them be more common because they're so spaced out. They were more common than ever before once I did the rotating time slot, but even then it was once like every 3 months or so, because of the mess that was. But now that I'm splitting it into 2 time slots and replacing Let's Tries, then that'll be good. I can get to these games more often. I've also been iterating partly with Silent Hill as a motivation. I've been iterating on my hardware to be able to record things effectively, because that's like a whole other complication that can be difficult, is just being able to record old consoles. But I've got like a few different solutions for that stuff, and I'm always like collecting more hardware and working on that. Because like Silent Hill 2 was iffy, Silent Hill 3 was the big breakthrough, and Silent Hill 4 will be using that technology again, was like the hardware I got the previous year to be able to record this stuff. See, now you see what's wrong with this particular shot. Yeah. You know, it's just fucking, it's hard. I don't have a crew. No one's watching the viewfinder. I'm doing the thing. It's annoying. Well, goodbye being able to see anything on the screen. Hope you caught those games in the other camera angle. But yeah, let's dive into some of these games. And then the other upside, of course, is that I like to constantly be covering indie-ish stuff on the channel, and also like a cornerstone of sorts is the puzzle game time slot. And like those just kind of haven't had like a clear place on the channel for a long time. Like, where do you put them? And it's because this new rotating time slot just made them so rare, and that was kind of frustrating for both me and elements of the audience. Like, I see this backlog come up of like Hades and The Room sequels and Superland Crash and things, and I have all these documents keeping track of all these things that I want to get around to, and I'm like, I'm just not, the bandwidth just isn't there. And I realized it's because all the bandwidth was choked up in one time slot, and now I can split into 2 time slots, so that's double bandwidth. So that's more or less where we're at. I got rid of the Let's Try Patreon tier, which just loses money for me with no particular upside as far as money goes. But I think it's best for the channel, and so I'm happy with that. And Let's Tries will still exist, but they're going to be less frequent. They're not going to be daily. I would say the most realistic solution is probably... this is like my stack of PS3 HD collections, but they're all off frame, so good job, me. Now we're just out of footage. Alright, well, I've talked for too long, like I always do. So now we just have a black screen. Good job, me. Alright. We'll just cut to my scrolling background then. So yeah, if you're a fan of the puzzle playthroughs and the indie playthroughs, those are going to be more common. If you're a fan of the classic game playthroughs, those are going to be more common. If you want me to cover the latest AAA releases and whatnot, those will be more common. They've never been common, so more common is damning with faint praise, but it'll happen more often than it has been lately. And I think that's just a better schedule overall. Just one more additional playthrough at a time. And then realistically, whenever a playthrough ends, I'll probably do like 1 to 3 Let's Tries in between, and they won't be selected by Patreon anymore. I got rid of the tier specifically because I can't promise that. So I can't have a monthly thing where people pay me each month and then put their requests in and whatnot. Because what if no playthroughs like end? Then there are no Let's Tries that particular month, for example. It's like, then what do I do? Do I backlog them like crazy? And then like next month I do 15 consecutive Let's Tries and there's no playthrough? Like, it's just, the two things couldn't really coexist. So that's the thing. That's the new channel setup. That's what's changed. So look forward to that. More playthroughs, fewer Let's Tries, same number of videos per day, generally speaking, and so on. And if you like the change, maybe consider supporting me on Patreon, because I have like sabotaged myself financially by deleting my highest paid Patreon tier for the sake of what I think is a better change for the channel. Now for the second part of this, which is the complicated part. There's a second schedule thing happening this month, which shouldn't be surprising at all. It's October, so it's time to start playing horror games. So completely irrespective of everything I've said so far, I'm just going to start trying to mash as many horror games and whatnot into the schedule this month once I have the chance. There Is No Game should be ending soon, so that'll be replaced by a horror game when it's over. And then the Let's Tries, I'm going to try to get through the requested Let's Tries from my Patreon as fast as possible early on in the month, and not do any that I choose myself. And then the moment that those dry up, I'm going to start another horror game. One of those will be Silent Hill 4, because it's been an annual tradition to play a Silent Hill game for Halloween. And now we're hitting the last one that at least some decently large percentage of people say is a good one. So we'll see if that tradition continues in the future. I mean, I can still keep going. I'll play the bad ones. I don't give a shit. Although some people will say 4 is bad too. But that's the peak of the mountain where there's an edge and people fall on one side or the other. I guess I should have called it the fence. That makes more sense. That's how people use that word. I'm very intelligent. So one of those will be Silent Hill. Another one will be some other game that I have not chosen yet. I'll figure it out. Anachronox, I think, is gearing up to end soon, although I am getting back on track with recording Wasteland, so we'll see how much comes out. But I'm kind of biding my time until Cyberpunk comes out, like a full month later or so. So I'll see if I can find a horror RPG that's approximately the length of the time we have left. Like, that might be a good solution. That might be what I do there. If I can just stack them all up. Being an RPG, it's probably more thematically horror-y and Halloween-y and less like, bah, scary and all that. But I don't really like that kind of horror to begin with anyway. I just like the aesthetic of horror more than I like, oh, did I get you? I got you, and all that stuff. And then additionally, you might see Let's Tries continue. One is that I'm giving people the option to suspend their final Let's Try request until November, so that if they want, so you might see some come up after the horror game ends, because the context was like, hey, do you want the horror thing to start sooner? Then I can wait and do your Let's Try in November so that the horror thing starts sooner. But additionally, there's going to be, I think there's going to be other Let's Tries that are not that kind of schedule thing. And this is because Stephanie wants to play horror games, and I'm game for that too. So we're probably going to be trying a bunch of horror games that I can get access to on itch.io and a few other places, and a few other horror games that I've kind of gotten access to and collected. And we're probably going to be doing a bunch of one-offs like we did kind of last year for Halloween. And so I think Y2K, or Yick, is going to vanish for October. And we're just going to take a break from that game, because when I have my weekly-ish recording session with Stephanie, I think we're going to record a variety of horror games and then put those out. And they'll just kind of come out whenever, because the time slot for Let's Tries will be kind of gone. So it'll just be replacing Y2K. But confining them all to the multiplayer days might be a little pointless, because there might be more videos than 2 a week. So if there's 2 a week, I'll just put them up in place of Y2K. But if there's more than 2 that we record in a given week, then I'll just kind of put them up on random days throughout the week. So you'll just kind of see floating Let's Tries after they are quote unquote done. And that'll be the thing. And also, just to answer, this is a fringe question, but if you're one of the people that was wondering what the classic game I kept hinting at that I was talking about being potentially an interesting playthrough and whatnot, it was not Silent Hill 4. It's just that timing wise, it's now finally time for the next classic game, and it's Halloween now, so it is going to be Silent Hill 4. But soon enough, the next time I pick a classic game, it'll probably be the one that I was like, I think that'll be a good project. And you might have noticed that these are all physical copies of games. That was just a demonstration of just a bunch of shit. Honestly, I just thought it'd be a good visual for the video or whatever. But those games are not in any particular order, and just because you saw something in the video doesn't mean I'm like chomping at the bit to play that particular game. But some of them are definitely games that I would like to get to. But also, they don't have to be in that video to be considered a classic game that I have access to, obviously. There are many digital games that I have. Like there was the Super Mario 3D Trilogy HD Collection 35th anniversary, whatever the fuck they called that thing that came out that has Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, and Mario Galaxy. Like I have that. There's things like the old Deus Ex games and the old Thief games that are just on Steam, just chilling. All those games that are in the rare replay on Xbox One. Like all those digital things also are applicable. It's just they're not. I wasn't gonna like print out like little pieces of paper with them on them and like fling them out to display and all that. Then yeah, like, and as you may or may not have seen, because the filming is bad, I do have like that giant stack of like the PlayStation 3 HD collections. Like there was like the Sly Cooper, Ratchet and Clank, Jak and Daxter, God of War, Hitman, Final Fantasy X and X-2, Kingdom Hearts, and I don't think I want to play Kingdom Hearts though. But like when those were coming out, I just kept snatching them up because I'm like, I might need them one day. That's like the Ico and Shadow of the Colossus duo pack, like Ico one of these days. Those kind of things. So those all make the potential list. So yeah, look forward to more puzzle games, more indie games, more classic games, and still occasional Let's Tries. But I think we've worked out a new schedule that works better for the channel. But it won't fully take effect until November. So it's going to start phasing out now, but also the October event's going to happen. So that's going to kind of contradict everything I just said. But once the 2 or 3 or whatever, Let's Try, the 2 or 3 whatever RPGs that I have going on all are over. Not RPGs, what the fuck? The horror games. Jesus Christ, I'm a mess. Once all those horror games are done, then we will start this new thing where probably like the noon time slot is alternating between classic and new games, and the 2 p.m. time slot will probably be the one that's alternating between indie games and puzzle games. So that'd be kind of a consistently indie slot, because the puzzle games also tend to be indie themselves, but I reserve the right to play Captain Toad Treasure Tracker whenever the fuck I get around to it in that time slot and things like that. But yeah, AAA puzzle is way less common. So that's the update. Long, convoluted explanation. I probably pissed off people that care about carefully preserving 3D cases and whatnot, to which I reply, wait till you see how many 360 games I have in like sleeves in a booklet, because yeah, non-applicable, but they're there. It's just at some point there's just so many there's so much hardware, and I've moved multiple times. A lot of those are going to end up in a book. A lot of those are probably going to end up in like a book sleeve booklet thing at some point too, just because where do you put it all? I don't have the space for this stuff. Well, thanks for watching like always, guys. You can support the channel at patreon.com/SebastianSB, link in the description. That's also where you can get involved in the voting process for the next game that comes after Zelda, Skyward Sword, but that won't be until Skyward Sword is wrapping up, so maybe not even in October. Throw around suggestions if you want in the comments for horror games. I won't necessarily take a suggestion, but you could surprise me with something that seems cool, and maybe I end up choosing that, because I have legitimately not chosen 1 or 2 of the horror games yet, because one of them's going to be Silent Hill 4, but I think we'll have another time slot at least that's a horror game, and I haven't actually picked it yet. And then the RPG slot might also become a horror game that's RPG-ish, and I've got a few things that come to mind for that if I have the time and whatnot. Thanks for watching like always, guys, and I will see you next time. These are always 20 minutes. I always think they're going to be like 8 minutes or like 6 minutes, and I'm like, I'm a disaster, because I always think, oh, we got to say every single thing. We can't leave a single fucking stone unturned. Got to make sure everyone fully understands, but then they're just going to not watch the video because it's too complicated.